Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank all of our colleagues today on both sides of the aisle who bravely stood here to express their positions on such an important topic that affects more than 50% of us. 51 years ago, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling embracing a person's decision to carry a pregnancy to term. In effect, declaring that it is a person's decision to terminate a pregnancy. According to the Cornell Law School, and I quote, "The constitutional basis for the decision rested upon the conclusion that the right of privacy embraces a woman's decision to carry a pregnancy to term. With regard to the scope of that privacy right, the court stated that it includes only personal rights that can be deemed fundamental or implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, and bears some extension to activities related to marriage, procreation, contraception, family relationships, child rearing, and education. Such a right, the court concluded, is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy," end quote. So what did Roe v. Wade mean? It meant freedom. It meant privacy. It meant health care. It meant respect. It meant bodily autonomy. It meant a future. It meant a court-given right to choose. After 50 years of a right protected by the courts under the protections of the 14th Amendment of our nation's Constitution, a Constitution that has not changed, 5 judges, 3 of which were appointed by a former President Donald Trump, instigator of an insurrection who has declared the intent to serve as a dictator on day 1, chose to ignore precedent, ignore their own words by perjuring themselves, declaring that Roe v. Wade was settled law, and then overturning a constitutional protection to the right of a person to choose to terminate a pregnancy. But we cannot settle in thinking that the Dobbs decision was the attack on our rights to choose. No. These attacks on our bodily autonomy began well before 1972 and the passage of Roe. However, since Roe was decided, over 13,000 state-based laws were passed to restrict access to abortion, and not because of a commitment to the healthy rearing of children, but because of our nation's long history in patriarchy and sexism. 13,000 laws were passed claiming that a woman should not have a right to make her own private healthcare decisions. Here in Colorado, the dangerous and harmful proponents finally realized that Colorado is a state that believes that abortion should remain a right. Coloradans believe that abortion is a personal, private decision upholding the 14th Amendment. Coloradans know that legal and safe access to abortion is life-saving. And yet, while Roe v. Wade protected the right to an abortion, it did not make abortion accessible. It did not mean that if you were living on a low income and raped, that you could afford an abortion. It did not mean that you were free from the lies and intimidation from those who do not trust your ability to make a decision. It did not mean that if you had a miscarriage, that you could continue unscathed by the scrutiny of investigations for causing a miscarriage. It did not mean that a clinic offering this healthcare service would be close enough for you to access, or that you could access the clinic without being harassed. And it certainly did not mean that your child would survive after birth, survive gun violence, even when your pregnancy was planned. The overturning of Roe v. Wade created a most unequal playing field for abortion access across our nation, and that was devastating. We have already seen the harmful impacts across the country who choose to outlaw one of the safest healthcare procedures. Brittany Watts, a woman, was accused of a crime in Ohio for having a miscarriage at home. Thankfully, the grand jury chose not to charge Ms. Watts. This is one story among many that illustrate the devastating impacts of abortion restrictions. So why are we bringing this resolution today? It is our duty as an elected body to respond to the fears and needs in our communities, and the fear in a post-Roe country is palpable. We are acknowledging that this fear exists, the fear for one's health, for one's life, for one's liberty, the liberty to choose. The bans on abortion are not just about people giving birth. It impacts those who choose to give birth by straining the perinatal health care system so that people who with intended pregnancies can't get the care they need. Bans on abortion exacerbate the already devastating maternal mortality rates for Indigenous and Black people. Think about what it means to be forced into pregnancy when your maternal mortality rates are so high that there is a strong chance you may not survive. We already know that states with restrictive abortion laws have greater mortality rates, and we are not in favor. Are we not all here in favor of protecting life? And if we are, then why are we not protecting the life of the pregnant person? I do agree with my colleague from Douglas County that today is a day of mourning. A day of mourning the loss of a constitutional right that gives everyone a choice to see a pregnancy through or a choice to not. But there is a silver lining in the post-Roe world. We have seen voters across the nation making their voices heard by enacting constitutional rights to abortion, even in conservative states. We are seeing the right here in the great state of Colorado to enact constitutional protections to abortion. We have the opportunity to support our congressional leaders in codifying this right so that we can all choose the health care we desire and need for ourselves. We have an obligation to reclaim our constitutional rights. We have an obligation to reclaim our freedom.